Yeah, there's so many assumptions that we have at work that we haven't thought about in forever. We should have an annual budget. Why?
Yeah.
Why is a year a year? Well,
Yeah.
You know what is how arbitrary is that?
You sound like a millennial now.
I know, man.
Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really cool to have you. We're here in studio in Penguin Group on the Strand in London.
Very official.
Yeah, feels very professional. We've got microphones and headsets, and I know for a fact that people are going to be generally excited about hearing your kind of thoughts and a bit more about your story, I guess.
Sure.
And we're here for a particular also occasion. We're going to talk a bit more about your new book, Brave New Work, which I think was really cool. Some cool concepts in it. We'll dive a bit more about that.
Sure.
But have you been to London before?
I have indeed.
Yeah?
Oh, yes.
What are your thoughts on London?
It's a funky town. I like it. Yeah, I've come, I don't know, maybe once a year for probably the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you published your last book back in 2011, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do like a kind of a book tour back then, or was it more like a low-key thing?
Not as much. I sort of launched that book terribly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was sort of like, here it is, and then we're done.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
No, it was more of a pet project. This is really more down the middle for me. So,
Yeah. And I thought that one of the really cool things, kind of digging a bit more in your story, I'm just going to put your microphone a little bit closer to you.
Sure.
Just so we can... I don't want to smack you in the face. That'd be awkward. But I thought it was really cool. Instead of doing a traditional kind of book tour, you decided to do a workshop tour.
That's right.
And going around different... Like, where did that idea come from?
Well, I mean, obviously a lot of the book is about changing the way we work, and my sense was, me talking at you for an hour was an insufficient. I didn't want to sort of crack the book and read to a bunch of sleepy people, so I thought do a workshop tour instead, and that way people could have a chance to experience the ideas rather than just hear about them.
And how deep are you on this tour right now?
Let's see. We'll be doing city number 4 of 11 shortly.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how's it going so far?
Great.
Yeah?
Really well, first of all, we're learning a lot. So the iterative approach that I recommend in the book is being implemented in real time.
Yeah.
The first thing I've learned is I'm used to doing these workshops with organizations privately.
Sure.
And so my instinct is for everything to be a secret.
Got it.
So the first one I didn't mention anything about you can take pictures, you could tell your friends, you could tell people to buy the book. I was like,
the most secret book tour in the world.
Exactly, yeah. By the second time I realized that, so we got that put together. But,
it helps when people start talking about your event, your book.
That's probably
whether they
thing.
tweet about it, Insta, whatever the kids do these days.
Exactly.
Cool, man. That's awesome. Fourth city.
Yeah.
And you excited about the book?
I am. Yeah. This is the first thing that I've done in a long time that I feel like I got a chance to sort of put myself all the way into it, and it really represents what I'm about. Yeah.
One of the processes, I haven't heard you talk too much because I've listened to a bunch of podcasts that you've done and stuff. So I know you've had a lot of similar questions. It seems to be like you're always talking about the operating system. We'll talk a bit more about that. But one thing I'm always curious is the story behind the story. So when did you actually start writing this book?
It would have been about 2 years ago.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
So how did the idea come about? Was it through the work that you're doing through organizations? You thought this needs to be in a kind of a concrete format and put everything in place? Or how did the idea of actually writing Brave New Work come?
Well, it was sort of, I guess there's two answers. The personal answer is that I was eager to cleanse the last book from my spirit and from my public record. And so there was a desire to sort of...
I didn't name the book on purpose. I was like, I haven't seen you talk too much about that old book, but I just thought I'd mention
Well, no, it's a fine book. It never was what I did for a living. It was never right in my wheelhouse. So I still get people reaching out saying, what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something that was right in line with what I love to do.
Yeah.
So it felt like a way to kind of put myself out there. And then the second thing is I feel like this is a category where new ways of working, whether it's agile or lean or self-management or whatever you want to call it, there's been lots of good theory and thinking out there in the world for, frankly, almost 4 decades.
Yeah.
It's never really been packaged in a way that is super digestible and practical and accessible.
Yeah.
So my goal was not to say anything new, but just to say things in a way where it goes down a little bit differently and maybe catches in a different way.
Yeah. No, I get that. And so you start the process.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people don't realize that when you start writing a book, it's a bit like a micro PhD. And you suddenly go so deep in the same topic. And some people lose their mind. They're just going, oh my God, I can't. But what was the process like for you to actually kind of churn that out?
Well, I mean, I liken it to a pregnancy, because it's very exciting in the beginning and then it starts to weigh on you. And by the end, you're like, get this thing out of me.
Yeah.
Or at least to the extent that I'll ever know about that.
Sure.
No, I mean, for me, I took the very kind of, rhythm-based approach. So every day it was, up at 8, get your breakfast tea, go write for 3 hours, break for lunch.
Yeah.
And, I did that 7 days a week for a year, really without stopping. Because as soon as you stop, you sort of lose your
momentum.
footing.
Yeah.
You lose your strength. So
No,
it's a muscle. And the great irony of writing books that most people don't realize, except for the journalists that write them all the time, is you build the muscle for a year as you write the book.
Yeah.
By the end, you're so strong. You're like, I could write 2,000 words in an hour. And then you go to promote and you go to do all this other stuff, and you completely lose that muscle. By the time you start again, you're terrible.
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome. It's really, really cool. Because one of the things I kind of hear you talk a lot about is, I guess, changing or reinventing the way we work.
Yes.
To unlock the human potential, whether that's in organizations, leaders, or entrepreneurs, or what have you. What's the earliest memory that you have of you noticing that was something you were called to do or excited to do about?
Yeah, for me, it goes back to, kind of high school, 12th grade, 11th grade, working in these retail jobs, office supply store, mall kiosk, where there was just absolutely no interest in my ideas.
Okay.
I was a cog in the machine as through and through as you could be. And for me, that was really frustrating because it was like, I have ideas. I see what's going on. I'm right here at the front lines.
Sure.
And I just felt like they didn't really care who I was or what my capability was. They just wanted me to put the boxes on the shelf.
Yeah.
So that created a kind of
and you thought that was weird?
A yearning. Just simply because I worked with all these other people that were brilliant people, and we were capable of doing more.
Yeah.
And we just weren't given the opportunity. And of course, now I look back and it's like, I'm still me. I was there, and they could have gotten a lot of free consulting.
But this is something you must be seeing all the time.
Absolutely.
That organization's like, no, we know what's best. We're telling you, do this.
Yeah.
And we don't want to hear your ideas. They're funky.
Yeah, we'll tell you what
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. And yet there's so much untapped potential when you actually ask the question, how can we help do the best work that we do?
Absolutely. And especially when, most of the work that we do now, and certainly almost all the work we'll do in the future after the robots eat the rest of it, is creative work. It's complex work. It's work that has all this sort of richness and judgment and, human energy involved. So the idea that anyone knows what to do. Do you know how to make a great movie? Yeah. No. No one knows how to do. People have, patterns that they've learned, and some people are better at it than others. But it's an art form.
Yeah. And so it was at a certain point, because I knew you had a former business before, and you're sitting on boards of different kind of organizations too. But you had this idea of starting the Ready.
Yes.
And you're launching in WeWork. I think that's where the offices were originally.
Actually, I think what was our first office? We were in a restaurant first, just at a table, and then we kind of bounced from co-working spaces.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely friends with the WeWork.
Yeah. So you got a testimonial from one of the founders, I think, which was really cool. I was very impressed by the roster of testimonials you got in your book. I was like, God damn, that's good. Seth Godin, like massive one on the top, and that was really cool. So the Ready, it seems like the Ready's mission, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like the mission is kind of, again, really kind of changing the way that organizations are working to be more human, more agile, more kind of flexible.
Yeah, our cheeky take on it is change how the world works.
Yeah.
Big
mission.
Yeah, we just want to make it more adaptive and more human. It's really that's it. Which of course is grandiose, and we'll never do that alone.
Yeah.
But we just want to chip away at it, do our part.
Sure.
And the idea was to sort of come right at that, because the last consultancy that I put together was more focused on digital change and disruptive kind of tech and things like that. And the way the work happened was a bit of it, but it wasn't the whole thing. And over time, we migrated towards that, realizing that it actually didn't matter whether it was AI or robotics or social or cultural unrest that you were facing with. If you couldn't change, the way you worked, then it didn't matter.
Yeah. There's a talk you gave. I think it was at 99U.
Yeah.
Where you talk about the mindset. Yeah. That was really interesting.
Like you could see the early seeds of this kind of in that talk 5 years ago or whatever. But it was realizing like, it's not about the thing; it's about the how.
Yeah.
And so now more recently, with the Ready, we just said, it's all about the how. Actually,
cool.
And we don't really deal with the what anymore. Someone's like, what should our strategy be? We're like, no. How should you create your strategy?
Yeah. There's
You'll
something
figure out the what.
Yeah. There's something that you say. I think I forgot where I heard it. Maybe it was in the book or somewhere I heard. You said that without the right information, you can't make the right decisions.
That's right.
There's can you unpack that a little bit for people who kind of just hearing that for the first time?
Well, one of the reasons that we talk about an operating system as a way of working, an OS, is that there's a lot of interconnection.
Yeah.
And so one of the most common mistakes I see people who get excited about this movement to empowerment and whatnot is they'll be like, all right, Monday morning, everybody can do whatever they want. But they forget that if you don't have information symmetry, if people don't have enough information, they might have the power, but they won't have enough context to make great decisions. So they'll make bad decisions. And then the leaders that were skeptical will say, see,
You see?
everyone's an idiot.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they're not idiots. They
Yeah.
just don't have the information that you
Yeah.
have. So, yeah, it's important to make sure that we realize the strings that are connecting these different aspects of the way we
Yeah.
work. Same thing will happen often when people try to create a new approach and then the incentives stay the same. You know, I'll sit down with someone who's been resistant and they'll say, yeah, my bonus is based on X and I have 2 kids in private
Yeah.
school. So,
Yeah.
like, guess what?
I'm
You
not
know,
changing.
I'm not changing anything. And why should? And why should they? Bad change is the reason people don't
Yeah.
change, right? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not that we're
and
resistant.
the fear of it, right?
Yeah, we're not resistant to change. If I offer you a new Maserati today, that's a change. Are you okay with it?
Yeah, I'll
Of course,
take it.
It's fine.
It's not baby friendly.
Yeah.
My wife would kill me.
All right.
But I
well,
get that. I get
We'll
that.
call it a Model X.
Yeah.
But in any case, like, yeah, that's fine. That change
Yeah.
is fine because
Yeah.
it's welcomed. But
Sure.
it's change done badly. That's not welcome.
Yeah. And there's also something I think was really interesting. I've kind of been exploring this in my work and also kind of studying other people, the evolution of work.
Mm-hmm.
And how, back in the day, in the agricultural days, it was literally, there was no concept really of work. It was just survival, agrarian families coming together as tribes, feeders, all this stuff. And then suddenly there were this concept of employers and employees, where it was all based on performance and compliancy and are you strong enough to kind of plow, right? And then obviously the Industrial Revolution came along. And one of the things you kind of talk a lot about is how still today, like the gurus of management and like the benchmark of productivity and efficiency is still based on school thought that was over 100 years ago.
100%.
That's mad.
Yeah. I mean, you cannot go into a global organization and not find a Gantt chart.
Yeah.
Henry Gantt worked with Taylor in 1911.
Yeah.
That's when that was invented to keep factories humming.
Yeah. They didn't have Netflix back then.
They did not. No, they barely had the things that we enjoy today. But I think the idea was when we're moving from an artisanal economy where everybody has their own way of doing things and there's no sense of what's possible, of what good looks like, then it was a logical leap to say, let's find the one best way and let's enforce that. That made sense.
Yeah.
And in many ways it was helpful, but what we lost in the bargain was the autonomy and the creativity and the connection to purpose and the sort of sense of, I have a role to play here that's not just kind of mechanical.
Yeah.
So we got all these gains in productivity and whatnot, but then when we moved to the next stage of development where we needed more innovation and more kind of awareness, and frankly, we had a little bit more social consciousness for what's the meaning of being at work and how do I feel about it. We became a knowledge economy. A lot of those ideas start to break.
Yeah.
And so, both on a performance level and just on a human level,
right? Because
not good enough.
No, because like one of the powerful things is the information that you hold and the creativity that you can come up with. But I do think it's interesting. It feels like we're at the cusp where now, because of AI, automation, machine learning, a lot of the tasks are being kind of outsourced and all of it. Now we've got to ask ourselves a different set of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And are you finding that wave is finally kind of hitting more organizations than maybe you did in your work maybe 5-10 years ago?
Well, I think there's sort of two schools of thought right now. There are the people that have the time to stop and think about where this is all heading.
Okay.
And then there are people that are just trying to tread water and hit the next quarter
Okay.
and get it done.
Yeah.
And so, I have two conversations. One is the people that are still thinking, how can I, in kind of a mercenary way, leverage technology to squeeze a little bit more productivity out of this thing, right?
Yeah.
They still see the organization as a machine,
Yeah.
and they still see, success as kind of independent of what happens in community.
Yeah.
And then there are other people who are saying, this stuff is all inevitable and it's fine, but what about the people? What about the human experience? Shouldn't success be defined as building organizations that ultimately lead to fulfillment, that ultimately lead to, kind of health and flourishing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just happier human beings and just being.
Yeah. And you see the sort of the conflict and the clinging to the old way and the curiosity about the new way, both here and also back in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have people like AOC and others in the U.S. and Bernie Sanders saying,
Yeah.
We don't want to get rid of capitalism. We like markets.
Yeah.
We like competition, but we also need ways to make sure that we're doing something that's ultimately human-centric.
Right.
Right? That's not
Right.
just Jeff Bezos-centric, but it's
Yeah.
actually human-centric.
Yeah.
And then over here with Brexit and things, there's similar, debate about what is the right way to solve this problem, and can we compete our way out of it, or do we need some different constraints on the system?
And do you think because of the rise of this digital era, it's one of the best times to actually ask ourselves what it means to be human?
I do. I mean, first of all, it's funny. I love arguing about the kind of ultimately human question, because there was never such a time, right? Like, were we most human in 1600 or 1800 or 2000? We've never been platonically human. It's a moving target. But I think I'm more interested in just flourishing. Like, what is, does it feel, do we feel well and happy and connected and sort of present?
Yeah.
Or do we feel, anxiety and stress and all these sorts of things? So I think that's the question, and that's really what I'm getting at. And what it means to be human is a moving target, so it'll continue to move.
Sure. But there was this promise that was made with the rise of technology.
Right, that it would save us.
It would save us.
Yeah.
It would make us more efficient.
Yeah.
We would have more time.
Yeah, but it's funny. There's a Huxley quote in the book where he talks about, technological progress is just the means to sort of faster rush ourselves toward our own demise.
Got it.
So it depends on how we leverage it. And one of the things I talk about in the book is, we need to define what success looks like for us as founders, as leaders, as teams, so that we can then steer.
Yeah.
Because you can use AI to create surplus and freedom and capacity and innovation, or you can use it to to create kind of two classes of people.
Sure.
And both are possible. So it really just depends on what we value.
And there's this metaphor that you use in the book when talking about two different possible scenarios, where you talk about the crossroad versus the roundabout.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really neat kind of idea. And I know I want people to dive more into the book about it, but in a gist, would you mind kind of sharing kind of how first you came across that? Was it like during a seminar, you kind of had this aha moment? Or do you sit down and go, I wonder what would be a good metaphor to
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny. It's actually it's a metaphor that's been used in this space for a while. I can't remember who I saw it from first, but someone else mentioned it in this context. And I felt like, that's so powerful. I have to expound on that. And so I did a lot of research to dig into that, especially with stateside data, because the most common pushback I get about roundabouts being so high performance is that, the Europeans, they know how to do that.
Right.
But in the U.S., we don't.
You don't have that many roundabouts in the U.S., right?
We don't. We have one for every 1,113 lighted intersections.
That is mad.
It's madness, isn't it? So anyway, the point of the book is that operating systems are based on our assumptions about people and problems and work, and the principles and practices that emerge from those assumptions. So one problem space would be the intersection, two roads cross. Yeah. The goals, of course, are that we want people to not hit each other and have a maximum throughput of vehicles. The lighted intersection with the red, yellow, green lights, of course, takes the assumption that people can't be trusted. That
tell them what to do.
Yeah, we need to tell them what to do.
Regulate
you wait here,
them.
compliance-based. And also that we need elaborate apparatus around us to control us. So there's the signals, and every possible scenario has to be imagined. And there's a control center, and there's algorithms.
And if that fails, someone steps in and controls.
Yeah, there's incredible kind of system around the problem space. And then the roundabout has totally different assumptions. It assumes that we kind of are responsible and we have to be present in the situation. So there's only two rules. There's simple rules. Go with the flow of traffic and give the right of way to the people in the circle. And with those two constraints alone, every possible scenario is sort of handled. So everybody can do it. What's interesting to me is that when you start to task people about, which one do you think is safer? Which one do you think has higher throughput? Which one do you think costs less to build and maintain? Or which one works better when the power goes out? The roundabout wins on every single metric in almost every context. There are a few specific places where obviously it makes more sense to have a lighted intersection. And I think that's the metaphor for work, which is to say, if we want to be more considerate of the context we work in, we're going to start to see opportunities for roundabout solutions to problems. So instead of a travel freeze where we have a top-down red light saying nobody can, book a plane ticket without boss approval, and we want to see everything, and we want preferred partners.
I loved your idea about transparency.
Yeah.
About what if instead of having that top-down, you have this idea of publishing everyone's travel diaries or like the costs. And make that internally public.
Yeah, one simple rule, one basic, and it creates social pressure instead of compliance pressure.
Yeah.
And it works great. So I think the idea is basically not that everything should be a roundabout, but just to say, when you're looking at a process, a policy, a structure in the organization, and you're knowing that it's not serving you well because it's bureaucratic, there's red tape to it, you can feel the friction. The question is, what's the roundabout approach? What would that be? And obviously, the book's full of them because we went out and found them.
Sure. Yeah. There's some case studies, examples. But one of the questions I have, and this is what I come across as well in my work, and I'm always curious to hear about this, and that is, when you go into an organization, I'm guessing that most likely it's an organization that recognizes that they could be doing things a little bit different. Maybe it's become too bureaucratic, it's become too stiff, or they're afraid of what the future of work will be. What do you say or do when you come across a leader in an organization that says, oh no, we don't need this. Or we have a well-being day program where we kind of come together and we talk about our values. I think you mentioned put it on mugs. I always say put it on the walls. What's your kind of reaction to that, or I guess your kind of conversation around it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing to say is it's not that uncommon for the boss to feel that way. Sometimes that's true, although I find more and more as I travel the world that most of us are pretty melancholy about work.
Okay.
Even those in great power. But even still, let's say that's the case, that someone's like, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah.
The next thing I say is, well, can we ask the teams? So what if we ask the teams what's stopping them from doing the best work of their lives?
Yeah.
And they have an answer, for sure.
Yeah.
And so just hearing that is a great starting place to just say, all right, now we have more shared consciousness about what it feels like to be
what's
here,
really
what's going
happening.
on,
Yeah.
what the potential and the possibilities
Yeah.
are. And then the question is, is there a willingness or an openness to change, to take a step in a safe to try step in the right direction? And if the answer is no, if there's heavy resistance, my response is no. I'm done here.
Yeah,
it's fine, because life's too short to convince people of things they don't believe, and I can't answer a question that you haven't asked yet. So what I advise is, if you're a team member in there, do what you can.
Yeah.
Run the experiments you can. Work with your team differently.
Sure.
Start to push. Start to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Chip away at it.
Yeah.
And if you can create movement, that's great. If you do that for a while and you can't, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I know that takes a certain amount of privilege to do that.
Sure.
But if you have that privilege, use it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you have to sort of do the long work, which I've also done before, of asking the right questions, pushing for retrospectives and moments of reflection.
Yeah.
Creating enough movement. And maybe you surreptitiously leave a copy of the book on your boss's desk.
You might enjoy that.
Yeah, don't put your name on it. Just leave it there.
Yeah. But because one of the things you talk a lot about is challenging assumptions.
That's right.
Right, and it's like, it reminds me a little bit of the Lean Startup Methodology, right, by Eric Ries, who talks about just challenge everything, right, from a startup perspective. And one of the things I heard you say once was, asking yourself, why do you have a boardroom table and chairs around?
Yeah, there's so many assumptions that we have at work that we haven't thought about in forever. We should have an annual budget. Why?
Yeah.
Why is a year a year? Well, what is, how arbitrary is that?
You sound like a millennial now.
I know, man.
Just asking so many questions. Why?
Yeah, well, and thank God for that. I mean, I think millennials, while they have a lot to learn from the world of work, they also have a lot to offer in that inquisitiveness and that resistance to doing it just because we do it that way.
100%.
The table and chairs joke which is only a half a joke, is you go into every conference room in the world and there's a table and 8 chairs.
Yeah.
And what I say is, what does that assume?
Yeah.
It assumes we're going to sit for long enough that we need a chair.
Yeah.
It assumes we're going to have some kind of papers or computers that we need to have on the table.
Yeah.
That somehow the work is going to happen in a round table format. There's a million assumptions there, and frankly, for 2/3 of the meetings I coach, that's not really necessary.
Sure.
I did a meeting a couple years ago in Italy where we actually used a room that had been cleared out. This was in a big consulting space, and we cleared out the room. People walked in, and before we started, they were so uncomfortable. Just like
we're in
a conference room, there's no chairs or table, and they just didn't know what to do, and so all the chairs had been shuffled to one side of the room and sort of stacked.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe it, but these executives in 3-piece suits
found
ways to sit on the stacked chairs, just to kind of
awkward.
Just to be in a somewhat familiar position. So the idea here is just, what is fit to purpose?
Right.
And so if you know what a meeting's for, if you know how to facilitate it, if you know what your goals are, then maybe a table doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so modular furniture, things like that, obviously are more interesting. But it's true of everything.
And do you do this internally with your team?
Yes.
And do you find it challenging?
Yes. Yeah, it's very challenging because, of course, there's always the shoemaker's kids problem, where we, don't have time to work on our own stuff or what have you, so that happens. And also, it's just painful. I mean, we did a big experiment over the last year about transparent compensation and then self-set pay. And of course,
like teal, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's our Kool-Aid. So I was like, let's drink it. Let's because our goal is different really than most companies, where they might say it has to work. Our goal is actually no, we just have to learn something, because then we can better advise our clients. Sure. So if it's a disaster, that's our job. Our job is to go to the edge and peer over,
as opposed to good luck with that.
Yeah. So we peer into the abyss, and so with this one, there were definitely moments where everyone was like, should we be doing this?
Yeah.
But it's fine.
What do you find that you are still afraid of? Right? Because I'm guessing that a lot of this work goes hand in hand with trust, goes hand in hand with the belief that there is a better way.
Yeah.
What do you find yourself still to be reactive about and fearful about as a leader?
Yeah, two things. The first is I'm always cautious about and confused about when to use power. So, because even when you give away power, we have a public benefit corporation where everyone's a shareholder and we run on consent and it's very, very hippy dippy. But at the end of the day, just the fact that I'm the founder means that I have an influential power. That if I get really adamant about something, even though I don't necessarily enforce it with an authoritarian power, there's going to be people that just go along.
Yeah.
And so the question I always have is, what does it look like to lead in a system like this? When do you step forward? When do you step back? There's a modulation there that's really confusing.
Yeah.
And so I just learn from that every time I do something, because I'll find out, I didn't do enough there, too much there. Yeah. And so I'm just sort of putting kitten paws on it as I go. Yeah. But that one, that definitely keeps me up at night. That's always stressful, especially when things are going sideways. Like you have somebody that's not a fit for the company, or you have financial problem, or whatever it is, you're sort of like, okay, how again am I supposed to play this?
Yeah. Because it's easy, right, to go back to the reactive.
It is, and I've done that, and it's a huge mistake. So it's like finding, looking back to the principles, looking back to stories of other leaders in the space, and finding your own way. Yeah. So that's one. And then the second one is, I always worry about how, because I can't control the behavior of others, do people in a system like this show up to each other and for each other in the right way? So if, do we bring those bad habits and those, kind of insecurities and all those other things to the table and minimize what's possible when we know that it's possible for it to be so high performance? Do we let our own, immaturity get in the way? And you see, ebbs and flows of that as well. So I want us to be at our very best all the time. Yeah. Sometimes we're not. And so even though it's better than the alternative, sometimes I'm like, could you just be nicer just a little bit? Could you just listen? Could you just open up and be curious about that comment instead of being so offended by it or whatever, so I want more openness.
I get that. And yet it also gives you a lot of compassion for your clients.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Because you can then go and you go, oh my gosh, I so know what you mean when we went through that.
Yeah.
So I get that we're coming to the end of the interview. And it just went by so fast.
Fast.
I know. So before we get into the kind of the final part, first of all, I just want to acknowledge you, say thank you for putting this work out into the world, both through your book and through your team and through the kind of talks and the content you've been putting out. Because I think the more, I often use the metaphor of the Death Star, and then Star Wars, when they had to attack the Death Star, they needed so many different kind of ships and sizes and experience to attack it from different angles in order to get to the core. So I feel like the more of us kind of trying to put this message out there to try,
something will get through.
Yeah, something will get through 100%. But I just want to say thank you generally for putting this work out there, because I know that the work that you're doing is changing people's lives, because every company is made of an ecosystem of humans, right? And humans acting more like humans is a good thing.
Yeah, 100%.
So I just want to say thank you for that.
Right on.
If I could give you I don't know if you've ever been on Piccadilly Circus. It's the equivalent of Times Square, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
There's a massive kind of screen right at the top.
Yeah.
And I could give you one sentence that you could put up on that screen that everybody would see. What would it be?
What's stopping you from doing the best work of your life?
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, I was expecting.
Because if I can get that question in everybody's head, they'll go find the answer.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
That's a good question. That I eat lunch alone.
Yeah.
You would think, in business and trying to meet all these people and travel everywhere, that I'm like some social butterfly, but that's actually my only alone time. Yeah. You'll often see me like, some lonely old man at a cafe.
You know what, mate? I so respect that.
Yeah.
I was running a workshop the other day, and they brought me lunch during break, because it was a short break, and the participant was coming up to me, and I said, actually, do you mind giving me the space? Yeah, do you mind coming back at the end of this
break?
break?
Recharge.
Yeah, and I've learned that a lot from my partner, she's an introvert by nature, and she needs a space and she needs to recharge and stuff. And so I've really learned actually the quality of that. So I appreciate that. What does being unconventional mean to you?
I think it just means, like we talked about, questioning everything. I think unconventional means being willing to go against the status quo, the norm, and maybe just having a little bit of a rebel spirit.
Cool. Love that. Where's the best place to go and get a copy of your book?
So I mean, it's at Waterstones. It's on Amazon. BraveNewWork.com has links to everything.
Cool. Yeah. And if people want to get in touch with you online, do you hang out somewhere on social?
I do. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter at Aaron Dignan.
Yeah, that's where we met, right? On Twitter, we connected on Twitter. Yeah.
So those are good places. And then theready.com is our site for the company if people want to talk to them.
Amazing stuff. And if you've got your tour coming up, workshops, they can check that online.
Right.
I'm coming to yours tonight, so I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Cheers.
Genuinely appreciate it.